So make sure you understand this, folks. Israel is excavating under the Temple Mount.
Right.
The Temple Mount is the Holy Land of the Muslims.
Right.
But the Israelis are digging tunnels under the Temple Mount.
Right. And so you saw that part of it there, and that was interesting enough. You know, I can see an archaeological dig. I can see, you know, you look at the rocks here, look at the foundation, and that would have great historical significance. What we saw next, Rick, and this will be the first time I know a lot of our viewers will ever be exposed to this. And so I want you to watch carefully in this next clip. We're going to run it with sound here because I want you to see what's going on here. I want you to look at the surroundings. We're still underground. We're going into another chamber of this dig. But this particular chamber happens to be directly under the dome of the rock. Okay?
And what is this chamber?
This chamber is actually a synagogue that's been built underground. A synagogue directly
under the Dome of the Rock.
Yes, under the Temple Mount itself.
So the Muslims above are aware that underground there is a Jewish synagogue under the Dome of the Rock.
Well, whether they're aware about it or not,
they are aware of it. This came out in the news a year or two ago.
But most Christians are aware of it.
That's right.
Okay, so let's watch this clip, and I want you to just look at, see anything peculiar around the surroundings here, around the ornaments or anything. See if anything really jumps out at you.
Should I be looking for a Nephilim?
Well, maybe.
Maybe like something round.
Okay.
Yeah, look for it here.
All right.
Okay, so you gentlemen had the opportunity to take a look at that clip. Edward, you notice anything weird or unusual there in that clip?
There is an enormous golden globe with Hebrew writing on it and a flame coming out of it. What in the world did we just look at?
A big globe of planet Earth with a flame coming out of it.
Right. Now, written on that giant globe there, they're running again for us here, is a prayer that's listed. I don't have the prayer printed out, but it's a prayer. But it does seem quite unusual that once again you have that global imagery popping up once again. Just like we saw with Genie Energy, just like we saw with the globe in Saudi Arabia. So this imagery is popping up over and over again. Now, a lot of Christians don't even know that this synagogue even exists, first of all. But now having seen this and seen that globe, what should the response be, Rick?
Well, my immediate thought is it's a symbol of global Zionism, overtaking the world, ruling the world from Jerusalem. Jerusalem, which the Bible says is Babylon. And I believe what they're showing us is, they have full intentions of rebuilding the temple. Now, the question, and we'll have to wait and see, will God allow them to rebuild a temple?
Right.
It's not God building a temple.
Right.
But will God allow the Jews to rebuild the temple? God tore down their second temple.
Right.
And I'm not convinced he's going to allow them to build a third one, but he may, because it will be the seat of power of the beast system. So Jerusalem will rule the world. This is what we're showing you, that Israel is taking the lead in artificial intelligence. For the first time, I've been at this job for 20 years. I have studied the New World Order, globalism, Freemasonry, the Vatican. I've studied all these things, Nazism, and I've tried to make sense of all this, and I finally came to a conclusion. As far as I'm concerned, I could retire. I finally figured out what is going on and where this is going. It is global Zionism. It is the synagogue of Satan, seizing control of the world and Jerusalem becoming the capital of the world. There's where it's going, folks. This is why I'm harping so much about Zionism. Somebody said, why is he on this? So I'm trying to tell you, this is the play for the end of time.
Yes.
This is the play for the end of time. This is where it's going.
Right.
It is a Zionist-centered global government out of Jerusalem, which the Bible calls Sodom and Egypt. It is the great city Babylon.
מנע שפיכות הדמים והצילנו מכל מיני גזרות קשות. מלך מלכי המלכים, וכיתתו חרבותם לעתים, וחיותיהם למזמרות, לא יישא גוי חרב ולא ילמדו עוד מלחמה, אמן ואמן.
If the UN hadn't already made severe cuts to its budget, it wouldn't have had enough money to stage the high-level week of the UN General Assembly when world leaders visited New York last month. Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said the organisation is confronting its worst financial situation in a decade.
The organisation is facing a severe financial crisis. To be more specific, a severe liquidity crisis. The equation is simple. Without cash, the budget cannot be properly implemented. Our work and our reforms are at risk.
The Secretary-General was very clear about the dire problems the UN is facing, but at no point did he list the countries that are causing it by not paying what they owe.
Surely you've got a big problem here and you need to name the people responsible for it.
There's 193 member states, 129 have paid up in full. The balance has not.
Of those who haven't paid, the US, which has the largest GDP in the world, owes by far the most, a sum of over $1,055 million. That's more than all the other 63 countries on the list of those who haven't paid put together. The US also owes well over $2 billion to the separate UN peacekeeping budget. James Bays, Al Jazeera, at the United Nations.
The United Nations could well run out of money by the end of this month. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres raised the alert in a letter addressed to all of the organization's 37,000 employees.
Mr. Guterres noted that the UN is running a deficit of $230 million. No thanks to member states fulfilling only 70% of their regular budget operations. The UN officials, speaking on condition of anonymity, said member states refused to increase contributions earlier this year when asked to.
Unspecified additional stopgap measures would now be introduced to ensure salaries and entitlements are paid, such as postponing conferences and meetings and reducing services. Official travel, well, that will also be restricted to only essential activities.
Not including what it pays for peacekeeping operations, the UN's operating budget for 2018 to 2019 is close to $5.4 billion, of which the United States contributes around 22%.
Shalom from Jakarta, Indonesia.
New York,
India,
Ethiopia, Uganda,
Ecuador,
Hong Kong, Nepal,
Tanzania,
Venezuela,
Singapore, Israel,
Colombia,
Portugal, Germany, Australia, Nicaragua.
Happy birthday.
Feliz 70 años.
Feliz aniversario, pueblo de Israel. Dios te bendiga.
Hay demasiadas cosas por qué hacer.
Ik voel dat iedereen hier één grote familie is door de warmte van de mensen en de gastvrijheid.
Yo amo a Israel porque es muy bueno.
Amamos a este pueblo mucho porque conocemos la historia espiritual.
I love the people.
Against terrorism, friend of India.
Y lo que me une con Israel es la filosofía de crear, innovar y crecer a pesar de la adversidad.
Israel is still contributing so many fantastic things to the world, even to its enemies.
Passover and Easter together. This is what Jerusalem is all about.
Very happy to spend Easter here.
Such a lot of different nations, such a lot of different religions living together.
Celebrating diversity in the culture and the religion. I think that's pretty great.
Peace.
Peace. Peace. Only peace.
And peace.
Peace for Jerusalem.
Israel is a nation of God.
Amo a Israel porque de ahí viene la bendición de Dios.
I love Israel.
Israel, you are loved. Para mí, Israel es el futuro.
Israel is a good country.
One of the bravest countries on earth.
Israel has the courage to fight against all the odds.
Whoever blesses Israel shall be blessed.
We wish you all the best to continue exercising this democracy role in the Middle East.
It's like our country.
I love Israel.
Happy 70th birthday.
Felicitaciones al cumplir 70 años.
Happy birthday.
Happy freedom.
Que tengan muchas bendiciones.
Just a few days before Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year,
And while heads of state are meeting at the UN General Assembly, a unique procession linked to the events takes place in Jerusalem. A group of people from different parts of the world gathered for a ritual sacrifice as part of the so-called 70 Nations Initiative, which aims to establish an alternative body to the UN based on biblical law and located on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem.
This meeting today is to give relevance, to give that it's important that the other nations who need the physicality, that they are going to get their physicality. We're going to build the physical temple, and the Jewish people are going to go up to a higher level of spirituality.
I think it's about the Creator, about a wedding that He planned since creation itself, a plan to where He scattered His people, and so that at the end they could come back together.
Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai.
This is an ancient procession which used to take place in the biblical Jewish temple. But according to one of the founders of the initiative, Professor Hillel Weiss, Jews are not allowed to sacrifice outside the temple. So the procession is done by non-Jews.
The non-Jews serve the Jews not in the cheap way. On the contrary, the non-Jews show the Jews how to worship God. The Jews want to have a legitimacy to do it. And so the non-Jews say, you have the legitimacy, you can do it.
Last year, Professor Weiss and his colleagues launched this initiative with a special event in Jerusalem called the Creation Concert. This year, dozens of representatives took part in the first convention of 70 nations. And though the idea to replace the UN with a religious body may sound far-fetched, it attracts participants to this convention.
The establishment of the 70 nations is rooted in that promise that God gave to Abraham, that he would be a blessing to all nations of the world. And whosoever bless Abraham, they shall be blessed. And so we are seeking a platform to be a blessing to nations.
I have nothing to say but to say thank you for Cameroon and Africa to be part at this end-time covenant.
Animal rights organizations may oppose this procession, but some bystanders pay attention to the unique gathering.
It was exciting. I hope the Jews can do it in the near future, not far from here.
It's very sad, but I think it's their tradition, so we have to... I just kind of understand.
The convention continued through the end of the week with a number of sessions and meetings, perhaps a new beginning for an ancient tradition.
Joining me now is Professor Emeritus Hillel Weiss from Bar-Ilan University. He's a professor of Hebrew literature, lawyer, and an activist that promotes the rebuilding of a third Jewish temple in Jerusalem. Now, that, of course, is a very controversial position, since that is also the site of the third most important Muslim holy site, the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Professor Weiss, great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much.
First, tell me a little bit about this initiative that you are going to, it's just happening this month in September.
We want to establish a new organization, which is, his name is the 70 Nations. The 70 nations come from the Bible, the story of the flood, that after the flood, all the humanity, all the sons of Noah have been scattered all over the world. They made a rebellion. They tried to build the Tower of Babylon. And then God was very angry because it was against, to prevent the Mabul. They didn't take seriously
the flood.
The flood, or they saw that they can twist the resolution of God. Then God saw them out, and they are in exile.
You believe the nations will come and repent?
We want to establish an international court according the laws of the Bible, but in a modern interpretation. There are a lot of bibliography on this idea, and a lot of material in the Bible itself.
Do you worry at all, Professor Weiss, that your initiative could actually spark riots, violence. I mean, the Temple Mount has been a flashpoint for decades.
I think that it's totally the opposite. I am the spokesman of the Sanhedrin, and we wrote a letter to all the Arab nations, or to the Arab nation, what is the task of the Arabs in the temple. It's written in Isaiah chapter 60, verses 4 till 8.
But surely, Rabbi Weiss, the Muslim leaders and the Arab leaders believe their role is defined by their own tradition, not what is said in Isaiah. No?
No, totally. We are brothers. Ismail is a son of Abraham, and he is the eldest son. And there are many Muslims, 100 millions, that respect our idea. Now we call to the event all the nations, also the Iranian, the Syrian, the Turkey. We say to the state of Israel, please allow him to enter in. We shall make a dialogue on this topic.
How does your support of rebuilding a Jewish temple in what Jews call the Temple Mount and Arabs call the Noble Sanctuary, how does that square with peace? Because, of course, that notion in itself is one that would not be accepted in the Arab world.
It's not exactly a Jewish...
And even by some Orthodox Jews?
It's not exactly Jewish temple.
Okay.
It's God, Hashem, the creator of the world. He have this initiative, and Solomon, the king, he wrote in the starting of the temple a prayer for all the alien people, for all the nations, when they are coming to the temple, what they have to pray to Hashem, God, Allah, or whatever you will call the entity that create the world.
So you don't specifically support the actual physical rebuilding of a Jewish temple? Because, I mean, that is something that many people say can't even happen until the time of the Messiah, right? There's very different theological views on that. Because that seems like it would create a problem for the kind of bridges you're trying to build.
I think that if the 70 nations will raise a committee how to do it, they will find a way how to do it. It helps to all the spiritual and physical and economic of all those 70 nations on the entire globe to cooperate not only towards the temple, but to, like the United Nations, that mostly is against the laws of Noah, in family affairs and many other affairs. We want to repair the United Nations, but the United Nations has many very good ideas that are working all over the world. We are not against the United Nations. We want that he will also make repentance, that he will also for example, there was now those great fire on the Amazonas.
In the Amazon forest, the fires.
All the humanity have responsibility not to destroy the globe. Now, we don't know if the people say about the problems of ecology, they are right, or the people that say that the globe is going to be destroyed because the changing of the climate and so on. What is a propaganda and what is not propaganda? So therefore, all the humanity has to make in one way a globalization, but from the other way, like Trump says, a patriotism. Brazil has the right on its country, on its state, but Brazil, like the United States, like Greenland, like Iceland, like any other place in the world, has responsibility that the ship will not be sunk in the water. So people has, from one side, to cooperate, but it's not communism, it's not total socialism and so on, but it's also not to make personal, egoistic economy.
Do you think, Professor Weiss, it is a fair comparison, the one you're making between the Amazon, which is a natural forest that belongs wholly and without any doubt to Brazil, and a religious site here in Israel, in the Holy Land, in Jerusalem, which is extremely contested?
It's all the same in Brazil.
But why is it the same?
Because in Brazil, they also imitate...
If it was the same, Professor Weiss, we wouldn't have issues on the Temple Mount today, no?
Look, in Brazil...
Jews would be able to pray, Muslims would be able to pray.
In Brazil, they imitate the temple. They build a temple in Brazil, but they know that it's not a temple. It's just an imitation. They want to come to Jerusalem, to work God in Jerusalem. But the International Court has responsibility to the Amazons, to the whales, to the animals, to the trees, to everything. It's holy, it's the creation. We made in the previous year a concert in the very day, a world creation concert, which is praying. It is a prayer to God. All over the Kululam, all over the squares in the world, they want to work all together, the creator of the world.
Professor Weiss, I want to just go back to something you already talked about a little bit, but tell me a little bit more about what you're hoping will be the Afghani guests that are going to participate in this conference coming up.
There are two Afghans that say that there is a chance that they will come. We make a connection between this Afghan and the Foreign Office, the Israeli Foreign Office, and we hope that he will get a visa. He got an Indian visa, but he has to get a permission to come and to enter Israel. Now, we are sure that it is a step for peace. It's not a provocation. It's overtake the valiant Islam or the Wahhabic Islam that are in a great trouble, but there are hundreds of millions of normal Muslimic people that doesn't want to throw atomic bombs on Israel and on the Jews and so on. Therefore, we are making a route, an overtake route for Muslims to come and work Hashem, Allah, God in Jerusalem.
The synagogue above us. We can see a menorah and the ball, and let's take a look at the other side. Okay, and here's the other view of the synagogue. And the other view of the new synagogue. And here is the menorah.
Just one little problem. It rains in here. You see that? Now this is exquisitely furnished. That's the onyx, the island that you see there. There's some gold in the furniture. Anyway, so they decided they have to build a new roof. It has not completely solved the water leakage problem, as you can see when it rains. So I'm going to ask you to take your eyeballs here and walk down.
I thought it necessary to go into some more information on the synagogue and the 70 elders and the Sanhedrin council, so that we have some understanding of what this governmental council, this council is about. In order for us to understand it, we have to really look at all the history and everything that goes into what it is that we're looking at this Western Wall hidden underground synagogue. I know there's a lot of questions about this, a lot of things that many of you are kind of confronted with new concepts, okay? Now, what is this? Is this the temple? What is going on? We obviously have, high-ranking U.S. officials now visiting. So we're really into something quite serious here. Now, what we're going to do is go over the details of what Ezekiel tells us, information he tells us about this, okay? And we're going to get right into Ezekiel chapter 8. Ezekiel chapter 8. Ezekiel is beginning to see something hidden by the wall. First thing he sees is something called a seat or habitation of an idol of jealousy. Okay? Now, there's things in this synagogue which are things that are types and shadows of the temple. All right? And this synagogue is necessary for there to be a place, a meeting place, a building, a facility for the Sanhedrin to meet. Once the Sanhedrin meets, then they can judge upon the matters, okay? So, Ezekiel sees in verse 5, Son of man, lift up your eyes now the way towards the north. So I lifted up my eyes towards the north, and behold, northward at the gate of the altar was an image or idol of jealousy at the entry. Okay, so this is a description of the abomination that makes desolate that the Lord Jesus Christ talked about. Verse 6, and he said, furthermore unto me, Son of man, see what great abominations that the house of Israel commits here, that I should go far off from my sanctuary. So there's things that are like his sanctuary. Okay, and he brought me by a door of the court, and I looked, behold, a hole in the wall. So what we have is this room by a wall. It's right next to the Western Wall, which you can see right in the background. We'll go through the pictures and the symbolism here, but we're just going to read Ezekiel chapter 8 and go through these details. Son of man, dig now in the wall. So we have to dig. Lots of people haven't seen this, so we have to dig. We have to dig in the scriptures. We have to dig in order to find out what this is. What does this mean? Verse 9, go in, behold the wicked abominations that they do there. And the circumstances around us finding this hidden synagogue was quite interesting. Previously in the day, we saw the altar dedication that was on Hanukkah outside the wall. And then we saw this place. So verse 10, so I went in and saw, and behold, every form of creeping things and abominable beasts and all the idols of the house of Israel were portrayed upon the wall. And there stood before them 70 men of the ancients of the house of Israel. Now, let's just take a pause on reading. We're going to come back to Ezekiel. Now, what is this? These 70 elders, these ancients. What is this? Okay, this is a important thing for us to understand here, because this is not new, okay? What's happening is this is God's counsel, his governmental order of this number 70. Now, this number 70 predates the Jews. You go back and you can see this as it relates to the nations. So there in Genesis, it describes 70 nations, okay? Then in Deuteronomy 32, it says God divided the sons of Adam, the sons of Adam, according to those nations, according to the children of Israel. Now, the children of Israel, of course, are the 12 sons, okay, number 12, and there is always 70. So Jacob goes into Egypt with 70, okay? Then the governmental order is instituted with Moses. Moses is judging all the people, and it's too much work for him, so he then gives, he lay hands on 70 elders. They then judge with Moses, okay? Then when we get to David, David has the temple, okay? The physical temple is instituted, and with it is also the 70 elders, okay? Actually, let's back up one more step here before we get into David again. And you can see we have scales here. We're going to talk about the shekel of the sanctuary in another message. You can see we have a coin here, okay? And in the shekel of the sanctuary in Numbers chapter 7, there are bowls, and there are 70 shekels, okay? That's the weight. A shekel is to weigh, okay? So it's 70 shekels that go into the bowl. So again, this bowl holds the offerings, okay? So again, this number 70 is very important for us. Okay, so then we have 70 shekels per bowl of the 12 tribes. So again, we have 12 bowls. Each bowl is 70 shekels in Numbers chapter 7. Then again, David, he has 70. I'll put all the verses here, but in 1 Chronicles chapter 16, the order of bringing up the Ark of the Covenant, there are 70. Now, David also institutes something called the House of David. There is a priesthood that is ordered and organized that is for the temple. And when in the temple, there are 24 judges. There are 24 singers and musicians, and there are 24 porters. So many times in the scriptures, you'll see the number 70 and 72 are synonymous. So if you add 24 plus 24 plus 24, it's 72. And again, we have this governmental order of 70. Okay? Now, David instituted an order of 24. Remember, each class was 24. Well, these are the 24 elders that we see in Revelation. That's a priesthood. He has made us kings and priests unto God. Well, how are we kings and priests unto God? We're kings and priests unto God according to the house of David. And that's in 1 Chronicles 24. So, 70. You see that? It's a governmental council. Okay, so God institutes this council up until David. And he's placed that order as the 70 souls that go into Egypt, as the 70 elders with Moses, as the 70 in the house of David. All right. Then once we get into Ezekiel chapter 8, things are going wrong. Okay, God has placed this order. God has said, build the temple. All right. But the children of Israel doing wicked, abominable things, and they're being judged. Okay. So when they're judged, they're always... The council of 70, the Sanhedrin, is broken. It's dispersed. Okay, they're dispersed. The temple is destroyed. They're dispersed. And then they're brought back again. Okay, and they're dispersed. And then they're brought back again. And so this is just the pattern. Okay, so now Ezekiel is then bringing us to a place of judgment on these 70 elders. Okay, so we could see them. And there stood before them 70 men of the ancients of the house of Israel. That's in Ezekiel 8, verse 11. Now, it also talks about verse 16, and he brought me into the inner court of the Lord's house, and behold, a door at the temple. Between the porch and the altar were about 25 men, with their backs towards the temple,
and their faces towards the east, and they worship the sun towards the east. Okay, so now what do we have? About 25. Well, we saw in the house of David how there were judges. There were 24 judges, right? So sometimes their numbers aren't exactly right, but it should be 24. Okay, because you see that in 1 Chronicles 24, and you see that in Revelation chapter 4, where there are 24 elders, which are given crowns, which are seated on thrones. Okay, so the precise number is 24. But we have these numbers here, and these numbers are exactly what we can see in the actual chairs in the synagogue. Okay, so we have this council. Now we have this council that God has set in place being corrupted and being judged. So it's being judged here, all right? And it's also judged at the time of Yeshua. Yehoshua is judged. He is sentenced to death by who? The Sanhedrin, the council of Pharisees. Okay, so that Sanhedrin is also based on these numbers. Okay, 70. Okay, and then sometimes they say 23, sometimes they say 24. Here it says 25, but it's the same thing. It's called a Beit Din, or a house to judge. All right, now let's look at what it says here about these, about 25. They have their backs towards the temple of the Lord. Now, if we look at this synagogue, what it's doing, it's facing the western wall. So it's facing what? East. Okay, and that wall, the western wall, is not the temple. That's a Roman fortress. So they got their back against the wall. I mean, their back is, they're facing the western wall, but their back is against the true location of the temple. So that's behind them. Okay, so this whole synagogue is oriented towards the Roman fortress. Okay, and their backs towards the temple of the Lord. So the temple of the Lord is going to be behind them. And their faces towards the east. So they're facing east, and they worship the sun. Now, if we look at this synagogue, we'll see this round ball. Well, that's what this is. They can say what they want, but it's the sun. They're worshiping the sun. They're facing the sun. They're facing this ball. They're facing east. And their back is to the temple. And he said, verse 17, Son of man, have you seen what they did? It's a light thing in the house of Judah to commit these abominations which they do. Okay. Now, another thing here I want to mention. Okay. Then he said to me, Son of man, have you seen what the ancients of the house of Israel do in the dark? Now, these are all things that are underground. Every man in the chambers of his imagery. Now, we've shown you all the chambers that will be part of the third temple. This synagogue is part of the third temple because you must have the synagogue, the Sanhedrin Council first. You have to have the judges in a row first. Now, we'll show you some of the other things we've shown you on their plans and everything that they said, oh, we're going to make this place for the Sanhedrin. No, it's already built. It's this synagogue, okay? But it's this synagogue being described here. Okay, and what they do, you see the chambers of their imagery. So guys, what happens is the reason there's a physical synagogue, a physical temple, okay, being built is because of what's on the hearts of the people. The chambers of their hearts, their chambers of their hearts are expressed through a physical temple. All right, and you can see that, for time's sake, we're not going to go there. That's in Ezekiel chapter 14. And then he said to me, turn yet again, and I will show you greater abominations that they do. And he brought me towards the door of the gate of the Lord's house, which was towards the north. And behold, there sat women weeping for Tammuz. Guys, if you go to the Western Wall, there's tours. Everything I showed you is public tours, okay, in the previous videos. But all along that, there's a certain section of it that only women could go to and pray. Now, tours go through and walk by. But that's what they're doing. They're weeping for Tammuz. They're weeping for this other god. Okay? And all this stuff is very unfortunate. You guys, we want to pray for these people. We want to have, love and compassion. But I'm just saying, this is the scriptures being fulfilled. All this is happening. Okay? Perfectly. So we got the weeping of Tammuz. You got this sun. Okay? Them facing east. They're back towards the temple. Everything it says here in Ezekiel chapter 8 is exactly what we see in this synagogue. Dig in the wall. Look underground. Okay. Now, as we've shown you before, let's mention this as well, that this is for the beast. Okay. The worships and the things that are going on is the beast. In Amos chapter 5, we can see, as a man did flee from a lion, a bear met him. And he went out of a house, he leaned on the wall, and a serpent bit him. So these are the characteristics of the beast. A lion, a bear, okay, a leopard, which we can see in Daniel 7, and a serpent or dragon or terrible beast. Okay, you can see that's clearly the beast there. Amos 5, verse 19. All right, and then it talks about feast days and offerings and all this stuff. But you have bore the tabernacle of Molech, the chun of your images, the star of your God, which you made to yourself. So it's clearly talking about a tabernacle being made to this God. Okay, that's what this is. Okay, and we're seeing this live. Okay, now I want to go to my notes to make sure I cover everything here. But okay, now so we talked about the Sanhedrin Council coming up in the time of the Lord Jesus Christ being judged, right? There were 70 elders, called a Sanhedrin. Okay, Sanhedrin is a Greek word for council. All right. Now, the group that did that is in John 11, verse 47. It says the Pharisees Sanhedrin. Now, that group of Pharisees in the Sanhedrin is the same belief system in rabbinic Judaism today. It's the same. Okay? But what happened is when they were destroyed in 70 AD, there's no temple. So then what they had to do is they had to reestablish worship through synagogues. Okay? And so in every synagogue, there were essentially two things. You would have something they called a bima, or in Greek, bima. Now, a bima is a seat. It's a chair in Greek, a judgment seat. Okay? And the way they do it in the synagogue, it's like a podium where they read the Torah scroll. So every synagogue has one, a bima. Now, that ball thing with the pomegranate, okay, which we'll show you. We'll show you all the details of this. But we're going through the scriptures first, is what they call a bima. And they say inside it is the Torah scrolls, okay? Now, the other thing every synagogue has is an ark, okay? It's not like a box of the Ark of the Covenant, but it's a place where they store the scrolls, okay? So that thing is both a bima or bima and an ark. And so inside it, they house these scrolls, okay? So this is what's happened. So what's happened is Jerusalem is judged, it's destroyed, Judaism is cast out of Jerusalem, and as the Jews are dispersed, they reestablish synagogues of worship with these various characteristics, okay? Now, at the same time that when the Lord Jesus comes, he reestablishes this governmental order of 12 and 70 through his disciples. We know that there are 12 apostles, okay? So he establishes this government order of these 12 apostles. Upon this rock will he build his ecclesia, okay? And there are also 70 disciples, which you can see in Luke chapter 10, okay? So you can see him instituting this governmental order, okay? So, again, this is not something new. It's always been there as a governmental order, but now in the time of Christ, he then places these mighty apostles, okay, who thus lead the church, the ecclesia, and these 70. These 70 were also in the upper room. Okay. So, again, when Christ comes back the second time, okay, he says to 7 churches certain things, okay? And he warns us to the church at Smyrna. I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. The synagogue we're showing you is the very synagogue Jesus Christ is talking about here in Revelation 2, verse 9. Fear none of those things which you shall suffer. Behold, the devil shall cast some of you into prison. Okay? So this is the clash, the war with the beast about this council being set. To the church of Philadelphia, behold, I will make them of the synagogue of Satan, which say they are Jews and are not, but do lie. Behold, I will make them to come and worship before your feet, and you shall know that I have loved you. Okay? So it's Jesus Christ that said this. He said there would be a synagogue. Okay? Now, how do we know this is the one? Well, we can see it very, very clearly described in Ezekiel chapter 8. Okay, let's read here Exodus chapter 24 and verse 9. It says, Then went Moses and Aaron and Nahab and Abihu and 70 of the elders of Israel. And they saw the God of Israel, and there was under his feet, as it were, paved work of sapphire stone. Okay? So one of the things that we can see in this synagogue is the sapphire stone represented by these like lights underneath the floor. Okay? And again, we've shown you before, but what we're looking at here is a section of chairs of 70 seats. There's 34 on one side, 34 on the other side, and a total of 70. All right, we have a podium, and the podium typically in a synagogue is called a bima, but they're also calling this a bima. And this is the statue, as we can see here, that Ezekiel is talking about. He said, Son of man, dig in the wall, go in the hole, go in. And this right here is the western wall. Okay? Then we have their backs towards the temple facing the east sun. So that's why this is a ball, because it is worshiping the sun. We have the pavement stones, the sapphire stones, which we could see in Exodus. And if you study Ezekiel chapter 1, you'll see that there was a chrysolite as well, and that's what we have here. So we have the seats of 70. We have the sapphire stones. We have the idol, which is like a sun, and this lights up. The top of it turns red. In these photos, it's not showing that, but we've seen that on site. These are some of the things we've shown you before. Another view from below of this sun idol. Okay, some other things that we have shown you in the underground synagogues. We have other videos that cover that, but again, here is a view of the sapphire stone, pavement stone represented. You can see you walk below it, and over here to this side is the western wall. Now what I'd like to do is show you the video which shows you the plans from the Temple Institute, whose organization is planning for the third temple. This is a photograph of that, because what they do is they have the 70 elders always sitting in a circular fashion. And they show their plans to build a Sanhedrin synagogue building and facility. But what we're learning is it's already built. So let's watch that. Okay, there's also been some questions about the Hanukkah. Why does it have 9 lamps? Okay, those of you not familiar with Rabbinic Judaism, the feast and festival of Hanukkah has a Jewish tradition that the lamps on the menorah lasted a certain number of days, and they began to, it was like a miracle. So because of this miracle, they added a couple lamps to the 7-branch menorah. Again, these are just not, we have no scriptural reference for this type of thing. It's clearly a 7-branch menorah, which are the 7 spirits of God, which are the eyes of the Lamb in Revelation chapter 5. So that's what that is, and you can do some more research on it, but there's been some questions, so I thought I'd cover it. Okay, so what have we learned? At Christ's first coming, he was judged at the synagogue and the temple. Okay, in the last days, Christ is judged by the synagogue and the temple. The temple that comes about in the last days, guys, has a lot more than a single building. Okay, there's a lot of things that go into the temple service and rooms and facilities and kitchens. And that's what we're showing you, everything that's already prepared underground by the Western Wall. Okay, so Jesus Christ said, "You will not receive me, but you will receive another." Okay, and that what you're seeing is all the preparations going into receiving that other, which we know to be the son of perdition. Okay, so now we have U.S. government officials going into this synagogue. You know, we're reporting on this. We're raising awareness to the importance of what this is. Okay, not a lot of people are talking about this, so we're trying to get this message out. So please share this. Please get this word. Look, this is going on. Okay. Most people are looking for a building to sit on top of the Temple Mount, which may or may not be. There's going to be something, okay, but there's something already. That's what we're trying to draw your attention to, okay? So a lot of work has gone into these messages. We have messages on the temple shekel. We have messages on the synagogue. We have messages on all the preparations and things happening for the third temple. So please watch the playlist on the third temple. We talk, at great length about the synagogue. We also talk about the shekel, and we talk about everything that's necessary into going about this. Okay, one other thing before we wrap it up, when we do have this latest thing, which of course is very shocking, seeing the Prime Minister, seeing the Secretary of State signing, the symbolism of signing. It's as if they're saying, look, the peace deal, we're signing. All right. So guys, we're watching these things, and as we always say, watch and pray, they be counted worthy to escape all these things. In Isos Christos' name, amen.